Now, let me introduce to you Tina Griffith. Tina is currently the Director of Food and Beverage for Traders Village in Grand Prairie, Texas. Though she likes to claim herself as only a hot dog saleswoman, Tina has spent much of her career throughout food service leadership, focusing primarily on sports and entertainment F&B projects. She was involved in opening multiple premier venues, including Staples Center, AT&T Stadium, and Yankee Stadium. Additionally, Tina was involved in menu and project development for multiple Atlantic League baseball stadiums, the Los Angeles Coliseum, and various Live Nation concert venues as well. She is now a valued member of the IAPA Food and Beverage Subcommittee and continues to contribute to the F&B and attractions industry in a great way. Thank you for being here today, Tina. We are looking forward to today's discussion. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Elise. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, COVID-19 Lessons Learned. One thing that we cannot escape in our daily conversation, no matter where we go, is how COVID has changed our lives and day-to-day operations. Today, our talented panelists will discuss how the pandemic changed processes and procedures in the food and beverage industry. We'll touch on everything from learning flexibility among uncertainty, opening and closing and reopening and reclosing parks with little notice, securing product, making service adjustments, and fit to state regulations, mitigating labor cost increases also. More specifically, Jeff will touch on how to shut down a theme park or zoo. Tracy will talk about closing and returning to work for your employees, reopening, new processes and what has changed in each of their parks, recruitment, and miscellaneous. Please let me tell you a little bit about each of our panelists today. Tracy Moreno is the Director of Retail Operations at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park. She began her career at San Diego Zoo in 1977. In 1981, she graduated from SDSU with a BA in Environmental Design, and she joined the food service management team at the zoo in 1982, where she worked in several management positions over the next 20 years. In 2002, she moved to the San Diego Zoo Safari Park as the interim associate food service director. In 2003, she became the permanent director of food service, and in 2011, then became the director of retail operations. She's been involved with several food and beverage organizations and committees over the years, including Food and Beverage Management Association, Amusement and Theme Park Service Executives, and National Association of Catering Executives. Tracy has also served as a brass ring judge for IAPA's Innovation and New Products in Food Service. Jeff is the Vice President of Operations for Whiting's Food. He has 20 years experience within the amusement parks and attraction industry. As Vice President of his family's business, he's responsible for several divisions ranging from the majority of food and beverage for the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, as well as exclusive food and beverage provider for Santa Cruz Warriors Arena, the Golden State Warriors development team. Jeff graduated from San Diego State University and received a BS degree in hospitality and tourism management with an emphasis on restaurant operations. Well, Jeff, are you ready to take it away?
Ready to rock and roll, Tina. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay? We all good on audio?
We're good.
All right. First and foremost here, there is a little disclaimer we want to get out there. Before we get to that, this is just a quick agenda. Tina had mentioned this briefly in her introduction, but we'll cover how to shut down a theme park, employee closures, and then returning to work, reopening processes we've learned and what has changed, recruitment, and then of course we got the miscellaneous tab, which will be filled with some various things that didn't quite fit in the above categories. Here's our California disclaimer. As Tracy and I both work in California, it is different out here than it is in the rest of the United States and the world for that matter. So we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware from our perspectives. You're going to hear it from a California disclaimer. California's been very conservative on reopening. It's been very challenging. It's been a lot of quick thinking, a lot of pivoting, a lot of flexibility that we've all had to come up with almost on a weekly basis So we're going to do the best we can to include what we've learned, what we've had to implement, and how we, as I mentioned, pivoted almost on a weekly basis to get through this. So let's get into it. How to shut down a theme park and zoo. First of all, in the 70 years of Whiting's Foods history, we've never had to consider shutting an amusement park down, especially in March. So it was a task that has never been done before. So I would start off with recommending that document everything, because what you're about to hear, what we had to go through, I'm sure is going to be very similar to what many of you had to go through. But let's hope we never have to go through this again. But if we do, document. Let's take note of what we had to do as far as shutting the stores down, communications, and everything else I'm about to touch on. So document everything. First recommendation. When this hit us in March, we had just prepared for spring break 2020. It was roaring to be a great year on the shoulders of an even better year in 2019. So our basement was stacked high. We had beer out the gills. We had food. We were ready to rock and roll. And suddenly, shut down for 2 weeks. Well, that 2 weeks rolled into about 12 months. And so we had to act quick initially. Our food, our inventory, our donating, we had to take a real hard look. Initially, we connected with the manufacturers, connected with the distributors, and we returned everything. Once we knew this wasn't going to be for 2 weeks, we were able to return a lot of the inventory, thankfully, that we could. What we were left with, we had to take a hard look. Okay, can we freeze this, and will it still be good in 12 months or however long at that point? So we were able to freeze a lot of items, to include batters and certain dry batters and certain things, to try to push the shelf life on them. And once we were able to be kind of exhale and realize we've done everything we could to get rid of the inventory, we looked at what we had left. And at that point, it was, what can we do to better serve the community? How can we give this? How can we donate? So we looked at local charities. Homeless shelters were an option, some schools if there was any supplies. And even though the schools were shutting down, so there wasn't too much for them, but we just looked hard at what we could do to donate the rest, knowing that it was going to go bad. So clearly we did not want that to happen. Once we knew that the 2 weeks was a long 2 weeks, we decided to, we have 29 locations on the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk here, and every single one of them gets used very hard during the summer. So thankfully they weren't too bad, but we went in and we cleaned the equipment, deep cleaned the equipment, the kitchens, pulled everything back, pressure washed the fryers, the hoods, the buildings, and then we shrink wrapped all the equipment. We got it all winterized. We set some pest prevention in there. So, the stores were shut down for a while, and that's when the little critters like to come out and play. So thankfully there wasn't much for them to find, if there were even any in the first place. And then lastly, once everything internally was kind of shrink wrapped and shut down, we looked at any gaps, windows, doors, or anything that might allow any of the elements or critters to get in, and sealed all those. So it was a really strange exercise to be doing in April, when typically we're gearing up. So that was something out of a science fiction movie. Other utilities. So clearly all of our buildings have gas, water, electricity. We had to go in and shut them down, make sure all the water lines were turned off the hot water heaters, try to do what we could to save gas and electricity and the utility costs. With no revenue coming in, we had to take a very hard look at where we could save money. So at our craft beer locations, we have live streaming TVs, where I was able to cancel the cable service, internet to our arena. As Tina mentioned, we do all the food and beverage for the affiliate team of the Golden State Warriors, known as the Santa Cruz Warriors. So I was able to shut everything down there, and any other services that we had to include. We have an IT contract with our technology company that I was able to really get that contract down quite a bit. Our POS, point of sale service contracts, was another area to save money. We were able to renegotiate with them to get our service, because clearly we were having no transactions. And then this was not necessarily our case, but I know rent and mortgage structures were negotiated with other companies that I'm aware of. continuing the moving down, we had to take a hard look at what departments we were going to keep online, what departments and what individuals we had to go. Tracy's going to talk a little bit about the employee side of it, but clearly there was still receiving and purchasing and finance that we had to keep on board. Although everybody's hours got cut way back, there was still need for that. And Tracy would know much better than I would, because I don't do any wildlife or horticulture care. But clearly the animals, as a cute little raccoon here, they even without guests in the zoos, they still need care and love. So you clearly have to keep them on. And then your maintenance and security. We had a very security was, I think, one of the only departments that didn't really I shouldn't say only, but they didn't get negatively affected as bad as a lot of others, because you got to secure the property. So thankfully they had done a really good job. And then lastly, in this section, we had to apply for PPP loans or PPE loans and do what we could to get a couple shots in the arm to keep us afloat, to keep our employees going as long as we could. And thankfully we were able to secure that as well. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tracy. Tracy, you're muted. Can you unmute, Tracy? Sorry. Should be that little green microphone in your top right corner.
Hey, Jeff, while Tracy's getting going, why don't you talk about a little bit about what you did with your employees when it came time for you to shut down? I know you had a few openings and closings, and how did you handle that with the people that you had on staff?
That's a great question. I'm sure Tracy will mention more details about it, but it was a roller coaster ride. Like I said, we had to go through almost every 2 weeks. Things changed, where then I'll get into a little bit more about this, but we had to, depending on the current compliance laws, we had to furlough a lot of our managers initially, and we also had to reduce their hours. So we brought them back and then furloughed them and brought them back, and depending on when we thought we were going to get reopened, but then there was spikes, so we weren't getting reopened. And I'm thankful that my employees are so flexible and willing to stick around, because it was difficult for them to have to take pay cuts and lose their hours.
I'm good to go now. I was on the other end that I was muted and I couldn't unmute it. Sorry. No way to communicate. Hi, everybody. We're really glad that you're here today. And as Jeff mentioned, as we got into our shutdowns, all of us in March, it was almost spring break. So we also had hired hundreds of new individuals that had just come on and just been trained, like many of you had, and quickly had to make some decisions about what we do next. So the word essential employee came out, and every business had a different interpretation of that. In retail or food service, everything is frontline. So if we don't have guests, most of our employees aren't going to be working. And that was a really tough decision to make. So we tried to decide, should we furlough them? Do we lay them off? What's the difference? Quickly found out that if they're furloughed, they're still on our payroll. If they're laid off, then they're no longer an employee. It was easier on our part to furlough them, because then we could rehire them quickly. So we chose to go that way. And I know a lot of organizations chose to lay people off. Technical difficulty, there we go. And so then we had to decide what their compensation was going to look like. Some of them got unemployment, and some of them are still getting unemployment. Vacation time, sick time, we had COVID time. Some organizations, and in California, we were mandated to do some COVID time. So if somebody was missing work for that, there was a limited amount that employees could use, but they did have that to use as well. So there was some support for them, but not a whole lot. It did come later with the additional of the federal unemployment, so there was a little bit of support. we had to be really flexible in the way that we worked. For safety reasons, a lot of people work at home. In our organization, we broke groups of people that were still going to be mainly our management team, into pods, and they worked on site every third day and had really specific things to do. It worked out really well because they were. It worked out really well because then everybody stayed safe. If one pod got ill for some reason, then the others could still work. My mouse is a little slow here for some reason. Then we had to organize people that were working at home. And that was a challenge, but it was very fruitful when we did take the time to decide together what individuals were going to be working on, give them deadlines, and make sure that we were following up on the work. I think some people work great at home, so some people have a real challenge. And that was one of the things that we figured out while we were doing this. We also had to set expectations when they were on site. We had people that were not normally working in location. Some of you guys, I know, closed for several months during the off season. We've never had that luxury, like Jeff said, unless we had a big fire or something was going on. We have never closed for a day. So for us, it was difficult, but it was also an opportunity that we didn't want to pass up because we were able to take care of a lot of our facilities that normally 365 days a year we're running on. The other thing we really had to talk about was how we communicate with our employees. If we had 300 employees at home, how were we going to stay connected with them because we wanted to keep them on our payroll? We sent emails, big blocks of emails, just checking in to see how they're doing. We did videos. This picture here kind of shows you a series of pictures that we did and sent out to our staff. Zoom calls. Everybody's an expert at Zoom now, and it's probably something that will definitely continue long into the future. But we were able to have calls with work groups, and the beauty of that was just that they got to see each other. It was a totally voluntary thing, but we were really surprised at how many people showed up. Jeff's team sent out congratulations to graduates. They did things on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram that kept them in touch with their employees. And they also found how important it was to stay positive and optimistic, but also realistic. We didn't want to say, oh, yeah, you'll be back next week. And we knew in our hearts that it was probably going to be weeks and weeks. At first, when we closed, I don't know about all of you, but at the safari park and the zoo, we thought it would be a couple of weeks. And then it was months later before we were coming back again. And who would have thought that we would end up closing again? But we all did. It was just important to be really realistic with them. And we wanted to stay in touch with employees that are working with us now, anybody that could be in the future, and maybe anybody that was an alumni because we might need to bring them back. We found ways to support people that were at home. When we had employees that were working, they had kids out of school, we were working a variety of shifts. We were letting them, we didn't have guests on staff, so it was easy at that point to let them go home for a couple hours, come back, take them to grandma, whatever the situation was. It was much easier for us to work with flexible schedules during that time. And we had a lot of employees here, the ones that are animal care, come in very early in the morning, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And when they were out of supplies at home, like toilet paper and paper towels, they didn't have an opportunity to get to the stores before they were out. So we did end up buying pallets of toilet paper and paper towels so that they didn't have to stress out about that and they could come in and do their work for us. Oh, shoot, I can't go back. Somehow I lost the last piece. So the last piece of that slide was had to do with, sorry, I lost my place here a little bit. Supporting employees who are not working. So we did in San Diego, and I think in California in general, there were food banks that were doing some specific food drives and food distributions for restaurant employees. So we were able to get all that information out to our employees, and they could go pick up a bag of food every couple of days or once a week during the time that we were shut down. And within our organization, we did food collection, and HR kept sending out notes if anybody was having challenges with feeding their families or themselves, to please come by because we had bags of food for them. And of course, all of you, I'm sure, have employee assistance programs, and those were really helpful, having to do with personal and financial issues that they were running into. So the next part of employees that I want to talk about is when we reopen, and there was so much to do, and things didn't go exactly as we had planned. We didn't know how to really rehire people. How did we notify them? And we had to work through that pretty quickly, but we also didn't know what business was going to look like. So balancing the business with bringing back employees, we decided to take it slow. We figured we would open so many locations, we would bring back key individuals, and just kind of keep that number that we were bringing back tight. It worked out really well, and the unfurlough was very simple. It was a letter they had to sign, and we could bring them back. So that was a real positive piece of it. The issue became that not everybody really was coming back. They had a choice on their letters to say, yes, I want to come back, or no, not right now. No, I'm not going to come back at all. Most of them were, yes, I want to come back, or I can't, I'm not ready to come back right now. And there were a lot of those. There were way more than we thought, but it worked out okay because we were bringing people back in chunks instead of everyone at one time, so we could defer some of them. But the issues they had were, they had health issues, they had concerns about the pandemic, unemployment checks. Were keeping people home because they felt safer and they were getting paid. We didn't expect that there was going to be additional hiring needed at the end of this. We had all these people from spring break, and then through the course of June to September, I think we brought the last ones back on September, we needed to hire people when we got into October. One of the things that we worked out that worked very well was training people online before they came back, because nobody knew what things were going to look like in our operation with COVID safety and all the new guidelines that we had to follow. So we ended up putting a training session together for our organization and also then for retail specific. And we were able to put them through our portals of My Academy, and the employees could sign on and take the training. It worked out beautifully because then when they came back, they gave us their certificate. They got a couple hours of pay for it, and they were all trained, because once they got here, there was nowhere to put 50 or 60 people in a room, and we couldn't do it at that time. So that worked out really nicely. We found it was really important to make our employees feel safe. They, we had to take the guidelines really seriously and make sure we were implementing things that were expected by both our guests and our employees. We ended up implementing health checks and doing a lot of social distancing. Jeff and I will talk a little more about that as we go through. And of course, masks. So the communication to employees with how we were handling their safety and the safety of our guests became important every single day. We had to teach them about safe workstations, appropriate signage, limiting guests, social distancing, sanitizing their work areas, how they were going to take breaks. All of these things were questions that we got every day. Employees, when they feel that we're holding others accountable for rules or the guidelines, then they felt safer as well. One of the things, a good takeaway from this, was we had to teach our employees how to hold our guests accountable as well. with some of the guidelines that they just really didn't want to follow. Masks were a big thing, and social distancing. And we gave them tools to use, ways to talk to people that were really gentle and kind, and taking the onus off of us, making sure that they followed these rules. But please, for the safety of yourselves and others, please, we need you to put your mask on. And I think it taught them some really valuable lessons and some very good methods to talk to our guests when they have really challenging items to discuss with them. And now I'm going to move this on to Jeff. He's going to talk about reopening.
So, well, just to back up for a minute, Tracy, now I understand why there's no toilet paper or paper towels available if you guys were buying them by the pallets. So
there you
that
go.
explains shortages that were everywhere. Yes, reopening. So the train stopped. I mean, our train was going 100 miles an hour. It had... Sorry, I muted myself again. The train stopped. And in the 70 years of being in business, we never had an opportunity for the train to stop. So it stopped, the people got off, and suddenly it was time to consider reopening. So Tracy had mentioned about some of the regulations, but for our park, we're an open gate, we're a non-gated park, free admission. So to figure out and to determine how to interpret these complex compliance laws took time. There's different ways. We were told that we could figure out what our capacity could be. It could be either based on your property square footage. It could be based on the amount of people that can fit in on your property with the 6-foot social distancing, or a overall percentage of maximum capacity based on the tier that we're in. And the little spreadsheet, the graph that you see below are the different tiers that we bounce back and forth in. And depending if we were in tier 1, the purple tier, the red tier, the orange tier, the yellow tier, dictated what you could do. If you could do indoor dining, outdoor dining, the amount of people on your property, if you could open up the casino, the bowling alley, Neptune's Kingdom, all those were dictated by the tiers we're in. So it took, thankfully we have a lot of smart people on staff who were able to interpret this, but it took a little bit to figure this out. And once we figured it out, guess what? We had to figure something else out. So it was a lot of bobbing and weaving. Some of the restrictions that we had to understand and take into consideration, the COVID, the CDC guidelines, as we all know, they kind of changed as things got better or got worse. All of our employees have to go through a screening every single day where you get asked a questionnaire, whether you've traveled outside the United States, whether you've traveled outside of the state. And if so, there's different requirements of how long until you can come back, 10 days, 14 days. Of course, the mask restriction was something that came on very quickly. No mask, no service was and still is the message that we're telling our guests. And to Tracy's points, we had to educate our guests. Sorry, I see my lights are going dark here. There we go. And then the quarantine period. So if you were exposed to anybody within 15 minutes within 6 feet for 15 minutes who had a positive result, then the quarantine periods were something we all had to understand, and the tracing, who was with that employee, and it was, difficult to say the least to stay current and keep everybody safe. Tracy alluded to it as well, but once we got open, we have a lot of exterior tables on the park, so we had to create disinfectant and cleaning stations for our employees. We had to staff that, and with the labor shortage, I could find so many other things for that employee to do besides go clean tables, but it was for the utmost importance of keeping our guests safe and our employees safe. So we had sanitation stations, they had logs, we have cleaning teams and maps of the park, so things were broken down into different zones, different tables. Depending on the tier that we're in, sometimes the tables would be there, sometimes the tables would not be there. So we created this sanitation team and stations and logs so we could keep top of mind. All of our locations, as I mentioned, we have 29 locations throughout the park, so we had to slowly, we did not open all of them at once. Some of them are still physically closed, but as we staged our openings, we had to look at every single location to make sure the queuing the line management, the floor markings, where it's applicable, separate ingress and egress. So there's an exit and there's an entrance that are separate from each other. Of course, the plexiglass, the sanitation pails, the correct sprays, the educating of our employees to make sure they can help to educate our guests as they patronize us. One of the things that really hit me recently as we kind of went from anticipating doing about 40% of 2019 numbers in 2021, that number quickly, I'm going to say we're going to do, once we get open, we're going to be 90+% of what we did in 2019. But we don't have the employees. We don't have the luxury of the older employees that we do. We are still obviously actively hiring. But we've had to take a hard look at the stores that are open and look at the menu items that are on those menus, which are the most labor intensive, and let's take them off. So some examples that we've done here, we kind of have like a wing stop concept where we are saucing and tossing wings with your choice of sauce. Well, we've done away with that. We're serving, just lack of a better term, naked wings with no sauce, and we're giving them dipping cups and being able to turn the lines much, much faster. Fresh spun cotton candy, that's a novelty that everywhere. We've made cotton candy on cones, but it takes a lot of time. So we got rid of the cone and even the bag cotton candy and brought in some prepackaged COVID-safe cotton candy that comes in either 2 or 5 ounce tub, as shown in the picture down there. Certain items that take time that can disrupt the kitchen with the inexperienced crew, like whole pizzas, we've taken off the menu. We've moved away from fresh dipped corn dogs and fresh cut fries for the time being, and brought in the frozen corn dog and frozen fries because we need to get open, but we just don't have the expertise in the kitchens as we are ramping back up at extreme business levels. Kind of as I alluded to already, anywhere we could find any kind of prepackaged, prepared food, and the pictures of the ice cream novelties were just one idea, moving away from fresh battered fish or fresh battered chicken tenders and bringing in a pre-battered product. And then again, as I mentioned, the cotton candy was something that was able to allow us to serve our guests at a pace that they're accustomed to. Moving on. So operational efficiencies and limited resources. Just to go into a little bit further depth about this. So our business levels as they are right now are spiking. We are very busy, don't have the amount of people so that we need to service our guests at 2019 levels. So we are trying to find other ways to help the crew out to prevent burnout. This is an opportunity for a fresh look as we do ramp back up. Are we doing things the way we have always done them because we've just always done them that way? Or is it a good time to look at what our support looks like, what our servicing team looks like, dispatch, auditing? Do we need to have all the systems in place that we've had before? Or is there an opportunity to kind of, if this was day one of our business, would we continue to do things the way we've done for 70 years? So trying to find a silver lining in this COVID world, it gave us the opportunity to kind of retweak some of our departments. As I mentioned too, we have digital menus, so I was able to eliminate because of the digital menus. If you don't have digital menus, they're a great tool. You can put your digital menus on schedules. So if you want to have more complex items, maybe you can make them available during the weekdays and then set it on a schedule to flip to a different menu on weekends. So you're not offering the 5 types of pizza, you just have 3 types of pizzas, as an example. One of the other things that we're having to do with our digital menus is eliminate beer from the menu because we're having a hard time finding 18-plus-year-olds. So in order to get those stores open, we're able to, again, thankfully, pivot between different types of menus to reflect one with beer and one without beer. Lastly, an idea that we've had honestly for a while, but we brought an outside cleaning crew so they can come in and clean, mop, sweep, stainless steel, filter fryers, clean fryers, do the dishes. And that really, after 8 hours of a long day, my crew, they have learned to really appreciate that. And not only that, it allows us to capture the last 5, 10, 15 minutes of that business at the end of the night. To rush to shut things down. So that additional revenue right there just helps to pay for any additional costs this cleaning crew may be costing us. So that's the suggestion that I would recommend if you can find any outside cleaning crews. They do have to get screened just like any of our other employees, but that seems to be the new norm. As we do ramp up here, the supply chain challenges are real. I heard just the other day from procurement that for every 10 trucks that are planning that could leave these manufacturing plants across the country, there's only 1 truck available to go. So I would recommend that you determine what you have. As I mentioned earlier, we froze stuff. So what are the items that we can pull out? Are they still good? Can we use it? Sit down and talk to your distributor, your primary distributor, your secondary distributor, and give them as much heads up as possible that you're going to be opening. Hey, I'm opening my Twinkie stand, deep fried Twinkie stand in 2 weeks. I got to make sure I get those Twinkies in 2 weeks. You have to stay ahead. When your primary distributor lets you down, I would highly recommend having a second distributor. Having a second distributor saved my hiney several times so far, not running out of pizza, not running out of the cheese, the whipped cream, all that stuff that for whatever reason, as everybody's opening back up, the demand is just draining these distributors, and they've been pretty gun-shy bringing in items because they were unsure and didn't want to get stuck with any inventory as well. So sit down with your distributors, make sure you have a clear plan, forecast your needs, put a percentage attached to those needs, and rock and roll with them. Equipment, we have moved away from, or we're in the process of moving away from our old POS, bringing in a new POS system. It's amazing the ability of the tap to pay, the Apple Pay. We have never had that before, and it's been a huge success. A lot of the teenage kids who may not necessarily have money have Apple Pay on their Apple Watch, and they just tap it on the card reader. Use QR codes where you can. You may have seen this in some restaurants where there's a QR code you scan, it brings up the menu. You might direct them to your website. If you have e-commerce, if you're doing any kind of DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, you could also get QR codes to direct your guests to purchase those amenities and commodities. As we got open, we had to take a hard look again. We had to unshrink wrap everything. We had to clean the beer lines, clean the soda lines, clean the syrup lines, turn the gas back on, test for leaks, get the electrical going, detail cleaning, because no matter how well we did cleaning and shutting things down, we're on the beach here, so sand just has a way of getting everywhere. So we had to do a deep cleaning, and then check our POS network connections. Last thing you want to do is have your terminals go down. I know this is a bit redundant, and so I'll go over it pretty quick, but the new safety procedures, this appropriate signage, plexiglass, the guest experience, what does it mean to the guest to come to your property? What are they required? Masks, health checks to go on rides, it's required. And probably the biggest takeaway for us is we have moved to being a cash-free property. I can bore you or excite you for hours about what that's done to our business, but we are cash-free now, and I'm a big fan of it. Not to mention what it's done to per caps and average transactions. And then, of course, we had to look at our packaging for our food, sealed, tamper-proof food packaging. We have a lot of refill stations, Slush Puppy Mix It Up, Icy Mix It Up, beach bottle refills. So we had to find ways to continue to offer those products without having the guests or having to touch the guests' beverages. If anybody wants to know more information about that, feel free to shoot me an email after the webinar. Reopening, perception is reality. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody is looking at you through the lens of a social media or through the internet. So I recommend what you put out there. Make sure you're paying attention to your internal customers, your employees, as well as your external customers. They're going to want to see, I would encourage you to put these images of your employees wearing masks out there, that you have a different hiring and rehiring message. What does it mean to come back and work for you? What does the new world of customer service look like? I think the benefits of socializing and being together as a team, as individuals, as people, is more important today than ever, especially as so many of our employees have been, and ourselves have been behind screens and not interacting with people. So it is a perk of the job that may have just gone without being, may have just been common sense a while back. Again, social media, make sure you communicate what's open, what's closed, what's coming up, what's in the pipeline. Again, what your guests can expect when they come visit your property. And I put this last one in here about update all the online sources to include Yelp, Google, but also your own website. It seems to get forgotten quite a bit, where you think the social media, your Instagram, Facebook, Google, Yelp is a good way, but you also have a website you got to make sure you keep updated. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and switch it back over to Tracy.
Hello again. So I'm going to talk to you about new processes. So there are a lot of new processes that we've picked up over the last year and 3 or 4 months, but also some things that we've learned that we'll probably keep doing afterwards. Some of the things that we won't do actually kind of surprised me. But one of these things that has changed significantly is really obvious in this video that was done at Santa Cruz. It gives you a really good idea of the way our employees have learned how to communicate with our guests. They're using their eyes, they're using their faces, they're using their hands, hand motions. It's really hard to communicate behind that plexiglass. And that was one of the things that surprised me when I was talking to my team the other day. We were talking about, when do we start taking down Plex? We have this deadline of June 15th, but we really don't know if that's the date it's all coming down. And I thought that they would all be, no, don't take it down. We feel safe this way. They all want it down because they can't hear the guests and the guests can't hear them. But this is a really great example of customer service as it is right now.
And there is no sound on purpose, just in case you're wondering. The importance of smiling with your eyes. Body language, nodding, hand gestures, anything you can do with your body to communicate.
Pointing.
Yeah, pointing, repeating the order back is really important, because the likelihood of getting something wrong is higher than previously. And then just being extra positive, because.
And you can really see somebody smiling, right, in that mask. Struggling here to move it on. Oh, there it goes. So one of the things that has changed and is continuing to change for us is the cost of goods and labor. They're both increasing, and they're increasing with no way right now to slow it down very well. Cost of goods, everybody's putting everything in packages. I mean, where everything has to be closed and packaged. All that packaging is not only trash, but it's also costing us as additional packaging for everything that we're doing. With labor, we've got wage increases, definitely in California. I think other places across the country, even with those wage increases, we just are not able to get the people like Jeff mentioned. So at Santa Cruz, he is paying people more as they get older, because they're so much more valuable to our team if they can serve beer, like he said, and that they can work longer hours. So as their age goes up and we can get them, they're paying them a little bit more, which I think is probably going to become a little bit more the norm here in California. The other thing is the cost of goods, the supply and demand. As we're seeing, it's more and more difficult to get products. They're going up and up. And we're having significant increases in chicken this week. And I don't see that there's going to be an end to that anytime soon. But all of that really affects us. Some of the things that we did throughout our operation that changed, not necessarily that will stay, but that we had to change that complicated our lives. In our kitchens, our commissaries, we had to limit the number of employees. And what that caused us to do was create more shifts. We had people coming in at 5 p.m. We had people coming in at 3 a.m. We had people coming in at a normal shift. And that was the only way we could do it to socially distance them properly within those kitchens. It made it really tough. But we also learned that the additional shifts is something that will probably stay with us because it gives us a lot of flexibility with our employees. Some that are older want to work late nights, so that it's quieter, or some have children and it's easier for them when the kids are at school or they're in bed at night for them to work. So we're finding that there's some real plus to having that experience. We had to use only one person in a vehicle in our commissary, our vending, our warehouse. They couldn't ride together for the last year and a half. So anything that happened with those properties and it took a second person, they had to walk, or we had to find another vehicle for them. Just another cost that was added. With our QSRs, that's probably where the most change has been. So totally new service. So everything had to be lines that were outside of locations that people could go into previously. We would limit like 2 or 3 people that could go in at a time. Jeff talked to you about limiting menus. That helped tremendously to limit our menus because we were able then to move the lines much more quickly. And when you've got people 6 feet apart, even in an outside line, it looks like they're a mile long, even if they're about the same as you always had them. Hourly full sanitations, so disinfecting tables between every guest. These are things that all have cost us a lot more labor. Those are 3 additional people that we typically would not have had in any of our QSRs. And we've probably got 7 now just at the park property alone. That 7 times 3, that's 21 people, right? That we had to add just about every day that those were open. Packaging, we talked about that already, everything. Jeff did mention drink refills, and what we did was go to paper cups. Again, an additional cost because we couldn't take their cup and fill it. I don't think anybody was able to use the self refills. So what we did was take a Coke paper cup and filled it up and gave it to them that way. It was the only way that we could maintain our refill programs. Managing masks, of course, is difficult, always making sure that everybody's got the right one on and they're wearing it right. One of the things that we found also, especially at the beginning, was to move some of those really popular products like our Icy and our Dippin' Dots and some of those things that sell really well that may not have been in the larger restaurants. We slid those over and put those on those menus, and it maintained that the sales of those popular products rather than having them shut down. Another thing that we'll probably maintain, we've always used pagers. So people come in, they order, they go sit down and wait for their order. We used to have that. We have always had them come back into the restaurant then to pick up their food. Something that's worked out really well is where we have an extra door. You can see in the slide here, people, we set up a table with Plex at it, and people would just walk up to that with their pager and we'd hand them their food. What it helped with was really keeping crowds out of the lobbies. It made things cleaner, less confusing for our guests, and I think it's one of those things that we're going to continue with. We have one full service restaurant here at the park, and we went to the open table system. We had not used that before, and that was huge with reservations and getting people into the restaurant and filling just the tables that we could. Because we were operating on such a reduced capacity, it made it really difficult to turn people away constantly. But when they knew that we were full, that helped with the communication of that a lot. Socially distancing tables, again, get them all 6 feet apart and really manage in California, when people took their mask off when they were sitting down to eat, changed frequently. Sometimes it was you can take it off when you sit down. Sometimes it was only when you were taking a drink or taking a bite of your food. When you were walking around, you had to stop completely, take your drink or eat what you're eating, and then put it back on and continue. But you couldn't walk around drinking a drink. So those things were really challenging for all of us and our staffs. to make sure that we were communicating. We could do no catering. We're a huge wedding venue. We do a lot of catering every year. And now, since last March, we haven't done any real catered events. But we had to figure out a way to make up some of that revenue once we reopened. And what we did, we creatively figured out how to do those events that would normally have been a Mother's Day buffet or a brewmaster event. But we did it so that it was a sit-down meal. So it was sit down with family groups, and they were all plated meals, and they worked out pretty well. The hardest challenge, or the biggest challenge, was the limited number of guests that we could have with them. If we could have had the full number of guests, it would have been much more profitable. But at least it was a way to keep in touch with our members and also keep our staff trained with what they're used to doing. So they'll be ready when we go back. Jeff touched on this as well, mobile ordering and the contactless payments, fantastic. And even we were taking cash during all this time, and the volume of cash that we were receiving and still are receiving is very, very small. I would say 5 to 7% of what we used to get. So people are changing that way. Jeff and I had a conversation about him going to cashless system. And I was thinking, well, I don't know, how you're going to do that. That seems like it might be really confusing. And really, why would you do that? When he explained to me the huge cost savings, when you think about bagging money for all your locations, somebody's got to deliver it, right? Somebody's got to pick it up. Somebody's got to count it. Somebody from Brinks has to pick it up and get it to the bank. We don't have any of that with our credit cards because they're all automatically batched and sent off to the bank. The biggest thing for me when he said eliminates theft, because they're not going to steal credit card receipts, right? For me, probably the biggest challenge is then what do you do with those people that do show up and only have cash? And maybe there's a way in the future that we can people buy bracelets at water parks and load money on them. Maybe there's a way that they can feed their $20 or $50 bill into a machine and get a gift card. And that's what they use for the day. So anyway, definitely food for thought and an exciting thing to look at for the future.
Oh my goodness, Tracy. There's so much to talk about. I know Jeff's got a little bit more to talk about on recruitment. And if you wrap up things, I just want to let everybody to know we may go a little bit over 1 o'clock today. I encourage you to stick around, but we definitely want to respect your time. I have a bunch of questions people have asked, and we will get to those. I just want to let everybody know we'll probably go just a little bit over 1 o'clock, and we will get to as many questions as we can. Hey, Jeff, you want to talk about recruiting?
Nah. Thank you. Thank you, Tina. I know, we have so much to say. Time is flying. I apologize for going over, but I'll blast through these slides. You guys, the new pandemic right now is labor shortage. As Tracy alluded to, I am paying more for older employees. $14 is our minimum wage. If you're 14 to 15, you get $14. If you're 16 to 17, it goes to 15. And if you're 16 plus, it goes to 18 as a starting wage. One thing I'd recommend you look at is what else do you have? What other incentives do you have to offer your employees besides cash? There's so much stimulus money going through. Unemployment is extended and more than ever. So what are the other aspects, benefits, perks that you can hang your hat on to recruit employees? We also have a work more, get paid more program. So the employees that only work 3 days a week, I would love for them to work 5 days a week so they get paid more. Additional hour if they work the 4th day, and two additional dollars if they work the 5th day for the entire hours they've worked that pay period. A lot of us have had to move to virtual digital job fairs. My fingers are too fast. Creative ways to advertise that maybe you haven't. Some of this is obvious to a lot of you, but Indeed, Monster, social media, LinkedIn. One way for us, that's the biggest way, is what we call crew search. We go to our employees and pay them to refer their friends, which is our number one recruitment tool. Hire them all. We're hiring 14, 15-year-olds. I had one of my employees tell me he goes to this school. And I was like, cool. That was when I was a kid. He goes, no, it's a junior high. I'm like, oh, geez. So we're hiring 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. You know, they have their restrictions, but it's better than having the doors closed. Get creative. Where else can you find employees? Senior living, J1 visas are all areas we've looked at. Once you do get these employees in the door, how are you interviewing them? We clearly have done Zoom. Everybody knows about Zoom, Teams, Skype. To get them interviewed remotely has helped a lot, not bringing them into the building, keeping them safe. Physically distanced training, it kind of just continues to go on with the options. Our payroll company has a plethora of videos available that you can go on and take advantage of. This in California, everybody has to go through a sexual harassment, so that can all get done online. To work in food, there's a food handler's course that's online, and there's some other great online training companies that I know of that I'd be happy to share with you offline if you want to reach out. And then once you do get your employees, the training on the group settings is going to look different. You're going to probably be more individually trained or definitely in smaller groups versus larger conference rooms packed with employees. That was a lot. I apologize for clicking through so fast. I'm just trying to be respectful of everybody's time. So with that being said, Tracy, why don't you?
I will whip through these really quickly too. We found out the importance of collaborating with our partner. The zoo and the park work together to determine our best practices, and we documented all of them. Extremely important. If we ever have to use it again, we've got some really great notes. I would recommend that you talk to as many people as you can in our industry and keep notes for yourselves as well in case anything like this would ever happen again. If you want to know more about how we work with our revenue share vendors, email me or send me a message of some kind, and we'll through IAPA, and I'll make sure that I get in touch with you. We added an entry cart out in front with all this needs that people need for a day. It was fantastic. It has done phenomenally, and we've done this before at other times, and it didn't work anywhere near as well as it did this time around. So I would recommend that you look at that if you haven't done it, and and you're opening or will be opening soon. Jeff mentioned the impact of food deliveries. We've had struggles with CO2 in our area. And believe me, that was something, when we sell 1 million sodas, that is something you don't want to run out of. But we're seeing more and more of that as well. Shortages in products that we use regularly, and shortages from our vendors that we never had before. So I just would encourage you to plan ahead and make sure that you're ordering things that you know you can't possibly run out of quickly. And the last thing that I have here is quickly to capitalize on marketplace needs. So those disposable masks, those park branded masks, I hope you all did that. Little sanitizers. Everybody wants a branded mask when they come in your park. So those are a way to make up some of that revenue that we lost for the time that we were closed. And I just want to say thank you very much for letting us present to you today. I hope you learned something, and we're happy to take your questions.
Jeff and Tracy, thank you so much. Having gone through the pandemic myself and trying to figure it out, I actually took a lot of notes on this from you to try to put together at my place. We got some really good questions today. One of the questions is it seems like no matter what you do in your park, that you're going to get vilified for if you're going to push for the everybody should be covered up or everybody should be uncovered. How are you handling kind of being pulled both ways? I know we get it more in Texas because we're a lot more open, but it kind of seems like no matter what you do, somebody thinks you're not doing it right.
Yeah, I think it was a little more challenging at the beginning because people didn't really know. They know now, and we do put it on our website. That was one of the things I didn't mention was what to expect when you arrive. And it's been really important, and I see it on a lot of theme park websites now. They tell you exactly what to expect, and as long as once you get on grounds, the employees support it, it's worked out really well. It's actually gotten better and better with time.
Awesome. Well, we got a question from Nick, and he wants to know if there is a possibility to get the verbiage you shared, Tracy, to train your employees how to talk to guests about following rules and procedures.
Yes, I'll be happy to send it. Do you have an email address, Tina?
I think that Elise will have it. She'll have all that information, and I'll have her get it over to you.
Okay.
For Mark, he wants to know, did you communicate, I think this is for Jeff, about the changes to the changes to your ingredients and your packaging to your guests? That was actually a question I had. Did you get any pushback on from going to a packaged product instead of a fresh? How did your guests react?
I'm not going to bring in a pre-packaged product that's subpar. I found some really good pre-battered, pre-packaged. Cotton candy was another one where nobody's batting an eye. We're unfortunately, I think we're in a situation where it's fortunate and fortunate. A lot of our guests understand why we're doing certain things. Our allergens and whatnot will not vary too much. So if there is a big variance, then clearly we'll make sure we communicate that on any kind of signage that we have. But overall, we didn't really communicate. We didn't really have to, because the changes were pretty streamlined, and thankfully the acceptance levels are very high with our guests, and they're very appreciative that we're open and we're trying, even though it is hard to make everybody happy.
Tracy, how about you?
We really aren't doing anything that's prepackaged at all, except for things like the cotton candy. We have gone to that, but we're using that in addition. But we have to package everything before it goes out to the guests.
Got it.
And that
another quick question. By what types of increases in per caps and check averages have you seen from going cashless? And also, do you think it's affected the spontaneous spending that sometimes you get?
I'll go ahead and just tell you, since we're an open gate, we don't do per caps, but I can tell you our average transaction's gone up $2.50 with the amount of credit card use. We did monitor how many sales we thought we were losing because of cash, and it was less than 1%. And now with the addition of Apple Pay and some other means, touchless payments, we are capturing pretty much every sale that there is out there.
Great. Tracy, you find the same for you?
Yeah, well, I would say that we have not gone cashless, but we are seeing people are spending. They definitely are spending, and for cap-wise, better than they were when we closed.
All right, one last question I've got here. Where do you see non-traditional revenue streams fitting into opening and sustaining your business? For instance, you use the entry cart for guests. What about carts and kiosks? Do you see these being more important as things begin to reopen?
From my perspective, we're not. It's about getting what we have open. We don't have any kind of carts. Tracy's example of the cart at the entrance of the property seems like a great idea. So I'm not in the retail space, so that's not my world. But
right.
Getting the locations we do have open has been a great guest service.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you, Jeff and Tracy, so much for imparting your wealth of knowledge upon all of us and taking your time today. And I want to take the time to thank everyone for listening and sticking with us. And I know that there's probably a lot more questions, and we probably could have talked 2 hours about this, but unfortunately we have to go. And Elise, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Tracy and Jeff as well. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. This was a great discussion, and we love hearing from everyone. We appreciate your time and expertise, and most importantly, your commitment to the industry and IAPA members. Just a reminder that today's webinar will be available online in a couple of days, so please check back for this recording and many others. This concludes our session for today. If you have any questions or concerns, my email address will be in any communications, and you can reach out to me. Thanks for attending, and have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.